Welcome to the Saints Crown Show. This is a show for men who want to grow. In a world where confusion is the culture and passivity is the practice, we exist to take men from gaining massive clarity to taking massive action, because we believe that if we can help bring order to your life, you can bring order to your world.
Welcome back to the Saints Crown Show. I'm your host, Zachary Reed, joined here with co-founder of Saints Crown, Preston Woody. And today we are continuing the conversation by providing clarity to some of the burning questions that were submitted to us by men like you. So let's dive in. How do you gain self-confidence?
What a question. I feel like self-confidence is an equity that is diminishing in our culture. Have you felt it?
Well, what do you mean?
I feel like a contrast to 4 years ago, even from 2020, people don't look you in the eye as much. People are looking down more. Like, you think of what are all the signals of lack of self-confidence? Someone who looks down, maybe someone who's not smiling as much. I'm just looking at external signals. Someone who is less generous, because the more confident you are, the more generous you're going to be. So they may be more stingy and close-minded and have smaller body language.
Yeah.
And they'll also probably deal with, to a degree, of imposter syndrome. So how do you gain self-confidence? I don't believe that you gain self-confidence by getting more motivation or getting the right people to say the right things to you. And I think that's what people think. Like, if I just had proximity with John Maxwell, or if I just had proximity with Jordan Peterson or Tony Robbins or my pastor, then I could gain this degree of confidence that they would see something in me, and the things that they would say I could write off. Like, maybe you can write off something someone says to you for a week, but it diminishes unless it becomes real. So the question is, how do you gain self-confidence? If you don't have it, your impact's going to be low because you're always going to question yourself. I think self-confidence is the number one, outside of having massive clarity, is one of the number one things that you need. So how do you gain it? You gain self-confidence by not being prideful. What do you mean by that? Prideful people are unwilling to be the fool in anything. Confident people have become the fool. Therefore, they jumped on the road to become the master. So you're never going to gain self-confidence until you actually master something of significance. Like, we want to speak confidence into people, but confidence in what? Like, I have my identity, my confidence in my Creator, in Christ, but I'm never going to be confident in speaking, depending on how much people say about me, until I'm actually competent in it. So competency does produce confidence. Yeah. It does. And people are unwilling to gain their competence in a specific field or craft because they're unwilling to play the fool. They're unwilling to look dumb, say the wrong thing, or fail a few times. So if you're unwilling to play or be the fool, you will never become the master. And that's where confidence is developed, to where you're so competent you don't have to think about it. You're not aware of what you're doing or how you're coming off. You're just thinking about other people. And that's the sweet spot. How do you know that you're confident? I'm not so self-aware that I'm always thinking of myself. Like, I'm in the space and I'm thinking of how I can add value and contribute. I'm not thinking about how I'm coming off. Yeah. If you're constantly thinking about how you're coming off, you lack self-confidence. So there's some competency issues, things that need to be sorted out. So how do you generate at it? Be comfortable with becoming the fool. Be the fool. Edge your pride away. And you can grow in competence, and then eventually confidence will come as a byproduct.
That's good. I think, too, it's like when you are in a state of peace to such a degree where you're not concerned about value or like you were saying, like how you're coming across to other people, but like you have this like assurance, like self-assurance, because you've like you've either mastered something or you've just like mastered self to a degree where it's like you're not allowing thoughts to control your actions or things like that, but you're in such a state of peace. That to me is a level of self-confidence where you can be in any situation and you're in a peaceful state and you're not worried about, oh, am I coming across the wrong way? Am I adding value here? It's like all of these things. Like, no, like you have a level of like stillness
Yes.
in every situation and room that you're in, without it leaning on the side of prideful, where you're so confident that you know that you know that you know. That's where you have to watch yourself, because if you get too confident, that's when you fall.
You also brought up something really interesting is your state. Is you can temporarily shift your confidence level based on your state. There are 4 different human states. Number 1, which is the state you were just talking about, is maybe an overconfidence, but sometimes that comes from being in a weak state. Like, what's a weak state? It's when you're hyper aware of you and how you're coming off. You're easily annoyed, perturbed, frustrated. And it's when you say things that you don't mean. You're highly insecure, maybe. The masculine and feminine polarity, it looks different. So like when I'm working with couples, we go through this state analysis of the state that you're bringing to the relationship. So if you can have, that's arrogance, I think would probably be the contrast to confidence. And you operate in arrogance from a weak state, is you're projecting what you know and you're not really interested in anybody else's opinion. And so the other states would be, just to add to that, would be a passive state, which is where you're there physically, but you're not there emotionally, spiritually. Your mind's somewhere else. You're distracted. And then a present state, which is a state that we love to put ourselves in, to be in the moment, to feel the emotions, to have our eyeballs are where our soul is. That's a beautiful place to be in. And then a peak state. So that's a state of confidence that you can actually dial yourself into. So when you're in a peak state, you're bold, you're generous. A peak state is when you're in flow state. You're not thinking about yourself. You're just thinking about giving and delivering.
And that's something that you have the ability to shift, right? Like recently I was doing a teaching in front of leaders, and before we started, I could tell before I even got up that the focus and attention was low.
Yes.
Like you can feel it in the room. And so the very first thing that we did is I had everyone close their eyes, and I just asked the question, ask yourself in this moment, like close your eyes and think about where on a scale of 1 to 10 is my level of focus and attention. Do I have am I in a high peak state or am I in a low peak state? And I just had everyone put their hands up in the air with the number that represented where their focus and attention and state was. Yeah. And the numbers were kind of all over the place. And so then...
What was the range?
Yeah, it was anywhere from like 5 all the way up to like 8 or 9. I don't think I saw anyone at 10. And so the way that I engaged them to change and shift the state was I had everyone stand up in the room, and I was like, all right, for the next 5 to 10 seconds, I want you to do something physical with your body. Jump around, dance, move around, shake it off, like whatever you need to do. And so in the moment, and everyone's laughing, we're all joking because it's like so ridiculous.
Yes.
But
and you're leading a business meeting.
Yeah, and this is like a business conversation. But it shifted the focus and attention in the state, and everyone was like laughing. And so then it made it easier moving into the presentation because we had shifted our focus. And so we have the ability to do that in any moment, at any time. If you're feeling low on energy, low on whatever, reset the state.
I love that. You have responsibility for your state.
Yeah.
And so if you want to, confidence takes time to build, but you can put yourself into a peak state and you can do that quickly, immediately. How do you change your state? Like you just led with that group. You helped them change their physiology. Like they moved. What is a weak state? It's still slumped over.
yawning, tired, like giving into your exhaustion.
Eyes going everywhere,
Yes.
right? A weak or a passive state.
Yes.
But you helped at least pull them into a more present state by leading from your peak state.
And we've talked about this in season 1. On the very last episode, we talked about the first 5, which is our framework that we do every morning to put ourselves in peak state.
Right.
And right before we started recording this, we were actually talking about this in the car right here about, I was just sharing, I can physically, emotionally, spiritually tell the difference when I'm in peak state in the morning, following my routine,
Yes.
and when I'm not.
Yes.
I'm like off my game
Yes.
when I'm not operating in peak state. And so part of that process for me is physical exercise, part of my first 5. And when I don't get physical exercise, it's as if I'm not giving my body a necessary medication in order to focus and have attention. And it affects my time with the Lord every day when I don't exercise. It affects my energy level, my focus, my attention, every aspect of my day.
Yes.
And so I can tell when I'm in peak state and when I'm not in peak state. And if I'm not in peak state, I have to remind myself, okay, it's time to shift and change my state real quick so that I can give this my full attention. Because the best, and you've said this, the best gift that we can give someone is the gift of our full attention. And if you don't have full attention and you're not in peak state, then
Yes.
you're not actually giving someone 100% of who God created you to be.
Beautifully said. Beautifully put. So to the original question, so how do you gain confidence? Number 1 is be willing to become the fool and grow in your competence.
Yeah.
Surrender your pride. Number 2, learn how to change your state, change your physiology. Like you led with that workshop, with that business meeting, is you can do that. You can change your state immediately, and it affects the world around you. Excellent question.
Great.
Thank you for investing in yourself with us. And if you feel like, hey, I found my tribe right now, go ahead and subscribe to the show. Or you can just find us on social media at Instagram at saints.crown. I hope to see you soon.